Alright, how's it going, crew? Welcome back. Today I've got another reaction video. I've been looking for some stuff and I saved a few things, but first I want to start off with this one. How a lost FBI tape surfaced on YouTube featuring Blame It on George by Barely Sociable. Now before we begin, I gotta say this. If you like these videos, leave a like so I know. Please subscribe to keep up to date with my stuff. And leave a comment down below on other videos you think I should watch, any recommendations, because these reaction videos are my best videos. But I do need more things to react to. Anyway, how a lost FBI tape surfaced on YouTube by Barely Sociable. Leave a like and subscribe. Check out their stuff. Anyway, yeah. Let's get into this. How does an FBI tape surface on YouTube?
Now, before we start today's video, I want to ask you guys a question. If you had to take a guess at the most common demographic present on my channel, what would you guess?
18 to 24.
Well, according to YouTube's own analytics, the most popular demographic on my channel is 25 to 34 male. And if you're wondering what life has in store for you throughout these years, well, according to the American Hair Loss Association, 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. And the quarter of that same group will see that process begin at around 21. But that's again to Keeps for sponsoring today's video.
All right. This is my first Barely Sociable video I've watched anyway.
My YouTube channels. And the reason that I rarely cover this kind of stuff is that the majority of these home films or home VHS tapes that are found by the internet to be creepy, most of the time are nothing besides a bit of home video taken out of context. But I can't really say that about today's topic that we are going to be taking a look at, because this video, wow, it really boggles my mind that stuff like this can just be found floating around on YouTube. And at the time of me writing the script for this video, this random upload has only about 50 views, and no Reddit threads or any other websites have picked up on this internet mystery yet. And while normally I'd be incredibly skeptical at any random creepy videos that appear uploaded on these pretenses, I'll explain to you first how I found this video. And I will say that this was sent to me by a user by the name of Castigamat, who was the same person who actually wrote about that Nanny Lynn video a while back and led me to covering that topic. And just recently, he reached out to me on Twitter asking me what I thought about this particular film that he had found on YouTube. And the upload he linked me to was uploaded to a channel by the name of Dr. Rip VHS. Now, I will say I get sent a bunch of creepy videos all the time. Much of them are just half-assed attempts at being ARGs that they want me to cover. But this was different, as the uploader is a person who collects rare VHS tapes from Goodwill. And with looking at this guy's content, this guy seems to be a legitimate collector with a provable backlog. And when I realized this, it piqued my interest, as this guy was asking for help identifying the tape in his description. And after going through this film incredibly carefully, I was actually
completely interested.
Other clues from the video itself to solve this one.
So, Goodwill VHS collector finds creepy tape, and it's actually real. Tape's contents. Is it a murder? It's something FBI related, obviously.
The VHS is titled Jerry Hill 199M, New York 252958. This was due to the given handwritten label on the VHS itself. The runtime is 8 minutes and 51 seconds, and the disturbing portion of this film can be seen written over parts of a 1988 television show called Cámara Infragante. The tape has no sound, and after 21 seconds, we are greeted with a title at the bottom of the tape reading, "Good Boy."
Good boy.
Here the camera shows 3 VHS tapes laid across the camouflage mat, where the camera pans in to show us a newspaper clipping. Around 38 seconds, the title is visible. Man charged with spraying irritant in Disneyland. Not much else is visible throughout the duration of the segment.
News involved.
And after zooming back and forth, the video cuts to a change in the title at the bottom. Dead Guest, it reads.
Oh, that's always fun. Somebody's
all
dead.
Older photographs, seeming to indicate to the viewer that these people have passed away.
Alright. I mean, I guess that's kind of creepy, but meh.
The camera lingers for some time until 2 minutes in, when the screen cuts to black and it reads, quote, nerve gas. Until 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
So the FBI
continues.
nerve gassed Disneyland.
Made easy. And just 10 seconds later, the video continues to greet the viewer with various things spread across the same camouflage mat. First is various chemicals, a pair of tongs,
Oh, he's making
a
nerve
clock
gas.
pointing to 9 p.m., and lastly, the number 14. At 2 minutes and 54 seconds, a hand with rubber gloves appears to pour some of the liquid. It's a clear substance. And later the figure would open up a metal container
Looks a little
to
thick
reveal
to be
another
water.
bottle of chemicals inside.
Okay, that's obviously something that has to be kept cold. Something kept very cold.
From hereafter, the figure continues over to the calendar, and we see a clear date. April 14th, 1995. And when
That
paired with
happened
the
April
clock,
14th,
it seems to indicate the
1995.
time of 9 p.m. on that date. We're at 4 minutes and 56 seconds. The camera then cuts to the phrase, dead guest, again. And throughout the rest of the video, it shows various other chemicals.
Someone made homemade nerve gas and killed somebody at
Some in the
Disneyland.
freezer, where the figure would continue to show them off to the camera. Until at 6 minutes, it would show a cutaway to an undisclosed street.
Okay.
And just like that, the tape would cut back to the TV show.
So, someone makes nerve gas, goes to Disneyland, sprays it on some people, and one of them dies. FBI gets involved, FBI takes the tape. It's an FBI tape. Later it gets lost, and the guy finds it at Goodwill and posts it on YouTube. If I'm right, then hurrah!
Now, that video is pretty cryptic, and while you might assume that the VHS title might yield some results regarding who made the film, not a single result comes up on Google pertaining to this name. However, on the other hand, the label on the tape seems to follow the FBI's Central Records System format, which, in case you are unfamiliar with how the FBI classifies its documents, here's a brief overview. The first digits on the FBI's record-keeping system classifies the investigation. The second code is what office the file originated from, and the third is the unique file number. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the M is in this case. However, if we look up the code 199 in the FBI's classification guidebook, you'll see that the code is related to foreign counterintelligence. And let me add that it's a very specific form of counterintelligence, and YouTube really doesn't like this word, but I'll let you read it yourself. So to summarize, this tape is related to counterintelligence, the file originates from the New York office, and the case ID is the following. And according to Dr. Rip, this tape was found at a Goodwill in Portland, Oregon. So let's next address the name found on the tape. While I have to admit the name Jerry Hill is a rather common name, there also appears to have been a FBI special agent acting around the 90s under this same name. According to newspapers, in the late 90s he was located in Nevada, and the last newspaper I could find referencing the special agent came from 2003, where the newspaper lists him as a special agent of the Portland FBI. If he retired from this point afterwards, it explains how we came in contact with this tape. So that being said, let's move on to the contents of the tape itself. Starting off, if you recall the newspaper clipping from the start of the video, the original article is dated April 1st, 1995, where this article discussed a man who released a noxious substance at Disneyland that got 33 people sick. When you see this paired with the phrase "good boy," it seems like the guy was cheering on another attack. And when you pair the phrase "dead guest" and the further mention of nerve gas, this seems to be a video of someone threatening the park's visitors. Because in case you are unfamiliar with nerve gas, even the slightest exposure to the substance can be lethal, as it causes respiratory paralysis. Or in other words, it just causes you to stop breathing. And what makes this video so unbelievably creepy is when you search for the date responsible for this particular incident. That being the date shown on the calendar, because if you search back in news archives for April 14th, 1995, Disneyland had received a VHS tape to the park security office on a day prior, April 13th. And according to an article from the Los Angeles Times, Disneyland spokesman Tom Brocato said Saturday that the park security office had received a threat on April 13th in a letter and videotape that showed a man wearing rubber gloves and mixing chemicals. U.S. authorities were immediately notified, according to Disneyland officials. Stern said the anonymous threat implied that a gas attack similar to the one in Tokyo in March could be expected at the Orange County theme park.
What happened
now,
in Tokyo?
I will note that this videotape that was received to Disney on April 13th, 1995 was later labeled a hoax, as nothing had taken place. But I think it's worth explaining the full story behind this tape as a whole, because while it may be true that this was technically a hoax, there's a lot more context here that's worth considering. And there's even more evidence to suggest that the tape that we just saw was the same one received to Disney that day.
So guy
The full
sends
story
him a threat
regarding
but
this
never
tape
falls through it.
begins with one of the most infamous cults in existence,
Oh.
Shinrikyo.
Oh,
or Supreme
yikes.
Truth,
I've heard a
Japanese
little bit.
doomsday cult that would deploy toxic gas similar to the sarin nerve agent in a Tokyo subway on March 20th, 1995. This event would prompt law enforcement around the world to take action regarding this cult, as their presence became an ever-growing threat to the general public.
Yeah.
A couple weeks later, at the start of April
That one was bad.
1995, Japanese law enforcement then notified U.S. authorities that two self-proclaimed cult members had been en route to Los Angeles International Airport. When the cult members arrived at LAX, they arrived a week before Easter. Several sources noted that they were stopped and questioned. However, whatever happened at this point isn't fully clear, as the FBI would not give information involving an ongoing investigation. Some reporting on the subject states that two Japanese men were detained for questioning, but where details seem to conflict regarding the reports is whether or not the men were released thereafter and what criminal evidence they actually found that day.
They were probably
On one
released
hand,
because
the Baltimore Sun had initially reported that when the two Japanese men were detained there, they were found to have had written instructions on how to make sarin, and a VHS tape where 3 dates were circled on the calendar on that tape, with the dates April 14th, 15th, and 16th, as well as 9 p.m. written on each of those days in the calendar. And that
somebody
their
got a
planned
hold of one of
target
those
was
tapes
Disneyland.
and sent it
But
to
it's also worth
Disneyland.
pointing out that this report seems to conflict with another report given by a Japanese official. A Japanese foreign ministry spokesman said that authorities at the airport found that the two men had in their possession printed material related to sarin, the nerve agent used in the Tokyo attack. Under questioning, the men said that their purpose was to get information from chemists there on how chemical substances related to sarin could be used for pesticides, the Japanese spokesman said. U.S. authorities at the airport accepted the men's explanation. The foreign ministry spokesman said, adding that nothing criminal was found, and supposedly thereafter the two cult members were released. Now, like I said, it's hard to say what exactly happened here on this particular day.
You're
And it's
probably
also worth
released
pointing out
but
that
kept
the
under
DOJ
watch.
spokesman completely refuted that anybody
That's
was
how
questioned
the
at
U.S.
all,
government likes
and
to
he
do
also
it, right?
refused to comment about anything regarding a videotape. But what is consistent
Supposedly.
among the reporting hereafter, it's that every source states that they have no clue as to the whereabouts of the cult members after their questioning. And just days after these men were questioned, that's when Disneyland received this anonymous threat to their security office. And as you can imagine, given the full context of what I've shared with you, this threat was not taken lightly.
Yeah.
So much so that even the President of the United States, President Clinton at the time, ended up commenting on the efforts to prevent any incident from happening at Disneyland that particular weekend. And since no attack ended up taking
So we
place at
prepared
this time,
for it,
the
but
threat
nothing
was
happened,
deemed a
so-
hoax. And this was the final word given on the subject. Investigators said Saturday that the hoax might have been perpetrated by a current or former Disneyland employee. A federal official said investigators are working on this premise because the threat was made against the park's guests, a term used by the park for its customers. And the letter and videotape were sent to the Disneyland security office. A criminal investigation is being conducted by the FBI in an effort to identify and prosecute whoever was responsible, Stern said.
I don't know.
But despite their best efforts, it seems whoever was behind this tape was never caught. But that being said, there is still a bit more to this story.
Okay, what more do we got? Yeah, no, I understand.
So if we tie our stories together here, it might be reasonable to assume that Jerry Hill, the FBI agent, was later working on this case. But if the FBI was later investigating this video under the assumption that it was made by a Disneyland employee, or this was simply just a hoax from an unrelated third party, then why was this a case file out of New York, and why was it labeled counterintelligence? Given the label and classification of this tape, it seems more to point towards the government investigating this under the Shinrikyo case file. Because 199 classifications are specific to foreign counterintelligence, so clearly we're seeing the DOJ spokesman say one thing here, and their own internal record-keeping system say another. Now, why is that? Probably because the story was leaked to the press in the first place. And it makes sense the New York FBI office would be tied to this particular case, because when it came to the cult's presence around the world, they held locations in a variety of jurisdictions. However, their presence in the United States was headquartered in New York, as they had set up their business with their nonprofit located in New York City. But that's not the only clue you can find searching for broader context. After the Tokyo subway incident that injured 6,000 and claimed 14, that's when nearly every government agency marked this group as a threat. And when you look through the timeline for when the raids in this group were taking place, they spanned from March 23rd to September 4th, 1995, and the police conducted over 500 raids on approximately 300 locations, confiscating 66,000 items of evidence in their investigation. And here we are just looking at one of those pieces of evidence. And I must say, it's rather bizarre that the Japanese official would claim that the U.S. authorities accepted the explanation that they were using sarin for pesticides.
They intercepted the two guys, but ended up letting them go. The two guys sent that message in.
But the story gets even more interesting
the FBI
when I tell you about
stopped
something that was
it.
planned on April 15th, 1995.
But the story got leaked that it wasn't
The
them,
cult's
but it
leader
was.
even prophesied that something terrible was going to happen on that particular day. And while I will note that the original prediction this guy made was that an earthquake would happen on April 15th, this still led to large amounts of speculation from people at the time that the group was planning something. This led to thousands of police officers lining the street in Tokyo that day.
It wasn't quite an earthquake, but it would have been something that would have shook the earth.
I bought bottled water to keep in my apartment, so just in case we can't drink the water for any reason, I have some water.
But nothing ended up happening. Knowing the context of our tape and this particular incident, it may have been possible that what he was referring to that day was the Disneyland situation.
The doomsday cult behind the deadly 1995 nerve gas attack on the Tokyo subway system was executed by hanging on Friday. Asahara was the head of the Shinrikyo cult. In addition to Asahara, 6 former members of the cult have also been executed.
Now, I should say when it comes to the Shinrikyo cult, much of the details surrounding this group have been discussed ad nauseum here on YouTube. And while this rabbit hole surrounding the group is extensive, the story regarding this tape and whatever they were planning at Disneyland this particular day is just a bit of a small side story. And while I'm sure at least some of you have heard bits and pieces about this story, I'll still give you a brief overview of the more interesting details. Perhaps the most well-known detail is that the leader of this cult, Shoko Asahara, had claimed to his followers that he had the ability to levitate, could predict the future, could see through walls, and was also apparently able to pass his powers on to his followers. But before he was able to do that, he was apparently an acupuncturist and a pharmacist. However, when it comes to this guy's career as an acupuncturist, he only lasted about a year in that field after getting convicted for causing bodily harm to a person after misusing a device that he should have been trained on. After this event, he would move cities to Tokyo, where he would open a Chinese herbal pharmacy. Now, he apparently made a lot of money with this pharmacy. However, he was later arrested for selling fake Chinese medicines, which led to him getting convicted for practicing pharmacy without a license. Now, after serving his time in prison, the guy would ditch his old identity from Chuzuo Matsumoto to Shoko Asahara, where he would move his grifting from medical to spiritual, and eventually founded his own religion inside of Japan, with the belief system being a mix of Buddhism, despite some reports apparently claiming that this man had no familiarity with Buddhism, as well as other mystic beliefs from the Eastern and Western cultures, as well as some Nostradamus stuff thrown in there as well, because doomsday. Now, it's worth pointing out that the group didn't come into prominence preaching the doomsday narrative, but this actually came about after a couple of major events happened with the group, the first of which was when the group had successfully lobbied the Japanese government to get recognized as a religious group legally. Once they had this legal recognition, this allowed them to operate with insane tax breaks and basic legal immunity, as Japanese law pertaining to religion prevented investigations into religious groups' activities. And the second major event happened shortly after this, when the group entered into politics, leading to a widespread humiliation of Shoko Asahara, as all of the members that ran, including Asahara, lost horribly. Asahara, for example, only managed to get about 1,700 votes out of 500,000, which means that he failed to even get all of the members of his own religion to support him. And this failure was about the only attempt that would make to capture power with peaceful attempts, because after this event, it marks a major turning point that led to their final Y2K doomsday prophecy, where members were told that the only way to survive this Armageddon was to adopt the faith. Apparently, this Armageddon was to be predated by a third world war between the US and Japan, and in actuality, these prophecies given by the group were just goals that they were working to instigate behind the scenes. The group used a variety of tactics to generate endless amounts of wealth, with the more expected avenues being selling religious training, to the more disturbing being leeching off of their followers, because the followers were told they couldn't keep their possessions if they wanted to survive Armageddon. Followers were apparently sold headgear that would supposedly sync their brainwaves to Asahara for about 10 grand a month. The group even resorted to other schemes like selling their leaders bathwater before that was a thing. And not only that, the group went as far as to make money off extorting local communities by essentially setting up offices unless they were paid to leave. And the group also maintained large amounts of real businesses as well, such as tea plantations, chains of restaurants, fitness clubs, a phone dating club, and a babysitting firm. But furthermore, the group is also believed to have made a portion of their wealth from manufacturing narcotics, which the group had not only used for extra cash, but also used a certain substance that starts with L and ends in SD for particular brainwashing rituals that their followers would endure. And it's also worth stressing the level of devotion that people in this group had to show to their leader, with some members going on starvation diets, depriving themselves of sleep for days on end, being forced to listen to hours and hours of chants as a form of mind control, being forced to submerge themselves in hot baths and hold their breath, being forced to live underground, and it's worth mentioning that some members even died in this process and were secretly cremated.
Okay, yeah, okay, so...
If members attempted to leave the cult, they were in some cases killed and or kidnapped. So I think it's safe to say that this was a very organized power structure with some added religious elements that was held back on destroying the world. So much so that the group had even extended their reach to various other countries where they hoped to recruit more followers, buy exotic weapons, and they even were seeking to acquire nuclear weapons as well. So with all that being said,
why not? Everybody needs nuclear weapons, right?
As it was disturbing. So when it came to the situation in 1995 at Disneyland, it's safe to say that this particular plot that may or may not have been thwarted by US authorities was just a small snippet, where much of the events relating to this group have never been fully prosecuted. And with a whole bunch of events suspected to be tied to the Shinrikyo cult, there are still a lot of other things that remain unknown. And when it comes to the cult's downfall, it's
I
worth
really feel
mentioning
like
that Shoko Asahara was later apprehended a month later in May
that
of
tape was
1995.
definitely
And it wouldn't be until years later that Shoko Asahara and his other accomplices would be later sentenced to death. And despite sitting in prison for years, his organization has seemed to stick around, leading to a lengthy fallout over the years as the group has rebranded. However, the group still remains a fraction of the size that it used to be.
yeah. So I feel like that
Now,
tape's
getting back to
definitely
the
the one
videotape
from
itself,
them, and
I should
they are the ones
emphasize
that sent
that
it.
for as
They
much
were
as I've been able
thwarted,
to
but
tie
the
bits and
different
pieces
story
of
got
our
leaked.
particular story together, I should state that knowing anything about this situation with absolute certainty is very, very difficult. And while I've managed to piece together a lot of information, I must give a disclaimer that the Disneyland story is my interpretation of the news reporting at the time, and your interpretation may be different, which is why I have a Google document in the description of this video that includes a link to various articles and screenshots where you can kind of make your own judgment on the reporting for yourself. Because when it comes to this level of conflicting reporting on this incident, it leads to speculation. For instance, I'm not even 100% certain whether the tape was received to Disneyland or whether they got it off the men at the particular airport, because one minute the Disneyland spokesman will tell one newspaper he didn't know what form the threat that they received was in, and then on the same day he'll tell another newspaper that Disneyland received a videotape and a letter. And then the original leaker of this story says that the videotape was found when the two men were apprehended at the airport, and that Disneyland had only received a letter. Also, given the fact that we are presumably looking at the actual tape, where did the dates April 15th and 16th come from? So either there was more than one tape, or the leaker of the story got this part wrong, or we're missing even more info. I still have no explanation for that. And while you might think the easiest way to get some clarity on the subject would be to look at the actual documents from the FBI, despite me spending hours
He's got 3
searching for
tapes there.
specific FBI documents released to the public regarding Shinrikyo, I've yet to find any that relate to this particular situation. And looking online at the Freedom of Information Act requests on the subject, they've all been pending for years. And for all of the Freedom of Information Act requests that have been responded to, they are no responsive document answers, where this is the government's version of declining to comment, or them basically saying they don't have files on that particular subject. Now, given the fact that the cult is still technically around, albeit in a limited form, I understand why they would not want to release all of the documents. But this is awkward because I can't even find an Shinrikyo case file number to attach specifically to the tape. Because looking online at nearly all of the sources on Shinrikyo are secondhand studies that take place from government agencies. And if this is what we think it is, naturally I have to ask, how did an official copy of an intelligence tape that made it to the highest ranks of government, where the president was intimately familiar with the situation, end up loosely thrown out at a Goodwill? I can't imagine this is standard operating procedure,
I mean,
especially when we don't
weird.
even have the other files to go along with it. From an obscure VHS perspective, this thing almost seems too good to be true. And I'm not gonna lie, it kind of went through my mind that this was some incredibly elaborate alternate reality game meant to capitalize on a very specific news story. But after talking to him and trying to debunk this thing, I haven't found anything that would make me question the tape's legitimacy. And as it turns out, his friends found many of the details that I had found 2 years back. Because when it comes to this tape's story, this is actually the second time it's been uploaded, but his previous channel was deleted for copyright on an unrelated matter. So when it came time to re-upload this video on his third channel, as he had apparently lost another channel, I don't really blame the guy for forgetting the specifics of this particular tape. And that being said, I still asked Dr. Rip for a statement on how he found this particular tape, as well as how he started his channel. That way we can kind of get a bit more background for him. And while I will have his full statement in the Google document down below, I will summarize it in this video for the sake of time.
Good.
And the first thing that he clarifies was that he didn't start with strange and obscure VHS tapes, and that he had originally started making notebooks using VHS tape boxes of popular movies to sell at Comic-Cons. This led him to becoming a frequent shopper at Goodwill, and this also led him to the Goodwill outlet, or the bins, where, in case you're unfamiliar with these types of Goodwills, they're basically a last stop before donated items are thrown out. And the items here are from other Goodwill stores where other things did not sell. And here, things were sold by the pound. Here he began building stock of mainstream titles, and after some time, he began to become fascinated by the more bizarre tapes that he would find. This led to him wanting to share these tapes, and he began uploading these to his YouTube channel. He then goes on to explain his memory of this particular tape. He also found this at the Goodwill outlet in Portland, Oregon, And while he admits that the particular memory of this tape was vague, he was reminded from his conversations that he sent me that he had apparently saw other tapes similar to this that one day. He explained that he didn't have too many specific thoughts on this particular tape, aside from the fact that it was found alongside the belongings of what he believed to be a military grandfather. But ultimately, he describes most of the tapes that he found alongside it as pretty boring.
I said military when I saw the
that day. After going home to play the tape, he was shocked to find what he had found and posted this immediately to his YouTube channel. He had also posted this to his Facebook page then, and he noted that his friends were quick to jump on the case and find many of the details that I had as well. He states that he was impressed by what he had found, but ultimately he thought it was just some famous case that he hadn't heard about and slowly forgot about it. At the end of his story, he explains that he's just happy that people are taking an interest in it because that's what he believes to be the purpose of his channel and what it's all about. Now, in conclusion, I must say you never really know what you're going to find sitting with 50 views on YouTube. And this entire situation is just one crazy coincidence after the other. Between the original story being leaked to the press, so we have any kind of news coverage on it, to the tape being lost years later, to a collector uploading these things to YouTube, and to me even finding it here making a video. And regarding this final statement here with the information he's provided us, it still doesn't fully tell us the story of this particular
I feel like that
tape.
M is
The
important.
only logical explanation I can give here was that this agent was either giving this away on accident, or they passed away and it was found alongside their belongings, or maybe the FBI agent doesn't even realize that this was given away in the first place. Regardless of whatever the case may be, this is still one of the weirdest finds I think I've ever seen on YouTube. That being said, this is Barely Sociable. Have a good night.
Okay. Final thoughts. How it got leaked, no idea. But I do believe it's legit. It could have been from the cult people that made it to the US, or it could have been some kind of copycat seeing the article as well as hearing about the cult attack since it was fairly recent. But either way, I think they sent the tape to Disney when they realized the FBI and all that were showing up to stop them. They chickened out and never followed through. Or they never planned to follow through in the first place. It was just to scare them. I think that's what it is, though. It was either one of the members who made it from the cult or a copycat inspired by both the previous Disneyland attack as well as the cult attacks. But they never followed through. And then a different story got leaked out to kind of, I guess, keep it a little more hush-hush. So it wouldn't alert whoever they're trying to catch. And that's what I'm going to go with. Anyway, be sure to check out this video as well as like and subscribe to Barely Sociable. And also, if you enjoyed, please leave a like on this video, comment down below some more videos that you think I should react to, and subscribe if you want to see more reaction videos from me. I know they're my best videos right now, are the reaction ones. I do gameplay as well. I love gaming. Man, it is not getting the attention that these reaction videos are. Anyway, with that, I'll see you later, crew.